Hey, my name is Robin, and I live in Montana in a pretty remote area. I live near a national forest, so there's lots of woods around where I live. The nearest city is 60 miles away, and I live in a cabin with my daughter, and my parents have since moved in. I'm a college graduate, and I run a business, and that's my story. I have a 7-year-old daughter.
It sure sounds to me like you've got a beautiful life. I can't imagine a prettier place to live either. It's got to be amazing.
It's a really amazing, beautiful place to live.
Oh, it sure sounds that way. Robin, when was the first time in your life you heard the term dog man?
It wasn't until my brother and I had started listening to your show. This was maybe a couple months ago. And that was the first time that I'd really heard the term and understood what it was, what these creatures are. Prior to that, I had grown up in Wisconsin. I went to college in Milwaukee, and I had heard about the Beast of Bray Road, but that was how it was referred to, was the Beast of Bray Road. It wasn't really termed a dog man. So the first real exposure that I had that was in depth was with you, with your show.
When you started hearing about the Beast of Bray Road, what were your thoughts about it and its existence?
I thought that it might be something misidentified. The people that I had heard that had experienced it seemed credible, but when you're trying to wrap your head around something like that, in your mind, you want to just poo-poo people or think that it's something misidentified, because the thought of something like this existing is pretty horrific.
Oh, it sure is. There's no two ways around that. For some time now, you've had some unusual visitors around your property. Please tell us about that.
We have, Vic. We have a very unique situation where our family is being habituated by Sasquatch. We've known about them since 2011, and at first it was a very scary thing, but after talking with you, I know that that was not attributed. I was attributing it to them, and it wasn't the Sasquatch. But as hard as it is for people to wrap their heads around this, we have almost daily activity with Sasquatch. They are usually tapping on our house, or we have frequent visual sightings of them, and they're so familiar to us, and our relationship is very amicable. We don't feel threatened by them. I would let my daughter outside. Obviously, I go outside with my child because of regular things, mountain lions, bears, those kinds of things. But we would see the Sasquatch in the tree lines, and it just has been a very normal thing for us now to have these interactions with them, and we think that they are just wonderful and very loving, and we've never had anything negative associated with them.
That's got to be amazing, just being able to step out the back door and there they are.
It makes life very interesting. Anybody that has them habituating their family, they like to play jokes, and they take things that you like, and then you'll find it hanging from a tree, or they have a good sense of humor. I'll just put it that way. They've got a really good sense of humor. So it's delightful. We really thoroughly enjoy having them around.
Yeah, from the things you've told me about them and the things they've done, it sounds like they do.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, I'd say. When did dogman activity begin on your property?
My daughter, when she was 2 and just could speak, so this is just a toddler that could just speak, she started talking about these dog friends that tap on her window and want her to open doors at night and let them in. And I'm a single mom. I was living alone in the mountains with a toddler. So when I say we, I'm kind of referring to myself. I was trying to figure this out. And I thought maybe she just was talking about Sasquatch. I didn't know what she was talking about. I kind of poo-pooed her, but I knew that there was something that was waking her up and tapping because I was hearing thuds and things like that. And when you are living alone, you want to make these incidences something normal, like the house adjusting or a stray branch hitting the side of your house, because the alternative is scary. Even if it's Sasquatch, when you're first acclimating yourself that these things are real, it's scary, even though they're a benign thing. So that was when I first started thinking, well, what are these dog friends and why are they tapping on the window? And my daughter couldn't possibly be making this up. I thought it was Sasquatch because I thought whatever it is, they're tapping and they want her to open the door. And she was very insistent that they want her to open the door. We have security locks in the doors of our home where you engage these locks and 4 pegs go out horizontally to lock in the door and then 2 come out vertically so nothing can get in those doors, which I was very glad that we had those doors and she couldn't reach the handle. There's no way that a child can engage or disengage these locks. But at the time I couldn't figure out how anything could be audibly talking to my daughter and asking her to open doors. It made no sense to me. I couldn't wrap my head around how a Sasquatch could be talking to my daughter and having her open the door. It was very, very frightening. And coupled with her saying these things was this feeling I can't even describe. I constantly felt this feeling at the house, and the best way to describe it is being in hell. It was very oppressive. I'm not normally a depressed person. I know my mind, and my mind does not go to dark places. I will feel down, but never dark. I was so dark. I was constantly feeling like I was being watched. It's a feeling of oppression. I've been in a fight or flight situation. I like to go trail hiking and run. And I've been in a situation where I was running and I had a cougar nearing my tracks and turned around because I had that feeling like something was being watched. That's a pretty serious situation to be in. Compared to what I was feeling, that was nothing. I would take that any day of the week over this feeling. This was like something at your soul, at a soul level, making you feel hopeless, like you were going to die, and constantly being watched. I can't even describe it. I felt like my house was a prison, and on top of that, my child is telling me that something wants her to open the door. And like I said, Dogman never even entered my mind with this. I attributed it all to Sasquatch, and that why the hell are they making me feel this way? I didn't know too much about them at all, but I thought they're creatures, and how can a creature, a biological being, make me feel this way? Like I said, our land around here is Crow. I was searching, like maybe I'm feeling this way because the house is haunted, the land's haunted, there's something going on. And at the same time that this was going on, I would hear the doors jiggle at night, and I thought it was our house was haunted. To me, that made more sense than some creature trying to get in and have access to my daughter, which is what I think was going on and still is occurring. Until speaking with you, I was in such extreme denial over this situation, and I now have all these memories just flooding back about things that happened, like the door handles jiggling. You block this stuff out because it is so scary.
It is awfully scary. I can only imagine what that must be like going through that sort of thing.
The reason why I wanted to come on, I just want other people to know that they're not alone with this, and that with your children, when your children start saying things like this, to please listen and pay attention to what they're saying.
Yeah, I wish more parents would do that when this sort of thing happens. I can't explain the phenomenon where your daughter told you about, the whole mind speak phenomenon. I can tell you that plenty of other Dogman eyewitnesses and Sasquatch eyewitnesses, for that matter, have reported the same thing. You told me that you can tell the difference between when a Dogman and when a Sasquatch is tapping on your windows. How's that?
I definitely can tell the difference. The Sasquatch typically will thump. It's like if you were to thump your fingers against something, it's a dull thud sound. They're so strong, and we have hurricane-proof glass because we get really wicked wind where I live, but they will thump it, and it sounds like a thud, like a thump. And typically they'll go around the house. I know their routine. They go around the house. It's like they're thumping a perimeter. And to me, it's very comforting. I think they're here. They're watching over us. They're around. When these things tap the window, it is as if you had a nail. These windows are kind of soundproof. So if you can imagine you'd have to have a really heavy nail and tapping it. It's a really sharp sound. And the Sasquatch, they have nails like we have nails, but they're short. They're not long. And this has to be some kind of a really thick claw because it's a tap. And I even went outside with a nail, a big screw, and I was tapping, and I can't even get that sound to replicate because it's not a dense enough material to mimic that sharp tap that we have. And I don't have enough power in my finger when I hold it and I'm tapping to replicate that sound. So whatever's doing it, they have a very thick claw, and they have a lot of power behind their fingers when they're tapping. It's very, very different.
That's got to be so eerie to hear that sort of thing.
I try not to get scared because I don't want my daughter to be afraid. She doesn't see these things as scary at all. She said the only scary thing about them is how they look sometimes, but she's always called them her dog friends. And now that I've figured out that she's not misidentifying a Sasquatch, and I said, "You're not afraid of these things?" No, not at all. They're friends. They're really nice. They just want me to come out and play at night and open the door at night. And this was recently. This was a few days ago that she told me that she's 7 now. So this has been going on for 5 years.
Well, it sure does make you wonder what's in their minds trying to get her to do something like that.
It's awful. You want to make it benign as a parent and as someone who just lives this. You want to make it benign. You want to make them nice, as crazy as it sounds. You want to make them nice and benign because the alternative is that you've got an apex predator that hangs out outside your daughter's door. And the way that she describes how they get close, she said that they crouch over, and she got down like if you were to squat down. But she said they get very, very low, that they can get so low to the ground that you can't really see them at all. And she said they crawl up to the side of the house, and she said they look around, and then they'll tap on my window. And then that's when they tell me to go outside. And I said, well, you know that you can't go outside, right? And I try to frame it in a way where it's not going to make her scared of these things. As crazy as it sounds, I don't want her to be afraid of them. I don't want to scare her. I don't want her to be scared. But I just say, you know, you can't go outside at night. And I said, the Sasquatch, would they ever ask you to come outside at night and play with them? Well, no. I said, well, why? Well, because it's dangerous. And I said, if something is tapping on the window at night when mommy's asleep, and they're telling you that it's a good idea for you to go outside and play, do you think that that's someone that you want to be friends with and play with? And she said, well, no, but I don't think they'd hurt me. And as a parent, I don't know of one thing that has this kind of intelligence that's trying to manipulate a child to go outside at night. I don't know what their intent is, Vic. They haven't hurt her. They haven't hurt us. But I don't know of anything that has good intentions that would want a child to come out at night and would try to manipulate a child to open doors at 2. And that has been trying to befriend my daughter since she was 2. But she doesn't think that they're scary. She doesn't think that there's anything nefarious about them.
I can only imagine what you're going through in a situation like that. That's hard.
It is hard. And I told you this in the pre-interview that I've been in denial about this. I attributed everything to her misidentifying the Sasquatch. And when she was talking about dog friends, I just didn't put it together that she could be talking about these creatures. Maybe I just didn't want to, but you always want, especially living in the mountains, if anybody who's ever lived in the mountains and you've lived remotely, it can be kind of creepy. And you're very isolated, and you don't want to think. Sasquatch was hard enough to wrap my head around, but the thought that there's some apex predator that could easily eviscerate myself, my daughter, and anything that comes in its path, and that this thing is somehow targeting my kid, it makes you feel really sick. It's a sickening feeling because you don't know what they're after or what they want. And like you said, just because something hasn't happened doesn't mean something won't happen.
That's true. I just hope this whole situation with your daughter doesn't take a turn for the worse. Hopefully it won't, but I guess you never do know.
I do too, Vic. It reminds me of, if you've ever heard the term a long con, where somebody takes a long time to work an angle, and that's kind of what it feels like. It feels like a long con, like they've been communicating with her at least since she was 2, and not with me, like the Sasquatch communicate with me. And it is a mind speak. It sounds crazy to people that haven't experienced it. I can guarantee you that if I hadn't experienced it, I would think I was crazy. But it happens. They can communicate ideas. It's not like how you and I would talk. It's like these ideas come in your head. So I'm pretty sure that that's how these things communicate too, because I believe that they are extremely intelligent. People think that they're animals. They're something more than an animal. They're manipulative. I believe that they have some kind of an agenda. I don't know how sophisticated this agenda is, but they're definitely making themselves very known to my daughter and now to me.
Like you said, I hope this isn't some form of a long con. I guess time will tell though on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will. Until we did the pre-interview, you had never asked your daughter what the dog men on your property looked like. What did she have to tell you about that?
Well, until I contacted you, I was in complete denial about all of this. And I got curious after our first conversation, and I asked her what they looked like. And she said that they have ears on the side of their head, like us, that point back, but they're dog ears. They're not like human ears. It's just the positioning, that they're not on top of the head, that they're on the side like our ears would be, but that they're definitely dog ears. And she said they're really furry all over their face, that they don't have a long muzzle. And she said that their legs, so she hasn't been exposed to anything like this. I said, well, what are their legs like? And she said their legs are like a combination of Sam, which is our dog. He's a very big dog. He's a Great Dane Lab mix, but more the size of a Great Dane. She said it's like a combination of our legs and Sam's legs, but their feet are really big. And I said, oh, they have feet? And she said, no, paws. But she said they're really, really big. And she pointed, my brother is staying with us, and she looked at his boot, and he's tall. He's 6'2.5". And she looked at his shoe, and she said, like that. And I said, the whole paw is that big? And she said, the whole part of the paw. So she was looking at the pad of the foot, like if you would imagine a dog's paw, and pointed to the part where the ball of your foot would be. So the ball of my brother's foot. And then she said that it kind of has a part of its foot where our heel would be that extends back, but the heel's not on the ground. It's up above the ground. So I'm imagining that it must be how dogs have that hock that comes back. Maybe there's an extra pad back there. I'm not really sure. But she said that they have a really big, long, bushy tail. And she compared it to a wolf. She's seen wolves in the zoo. And she said it's like that. And it's really fluffy and really pretty. And she wants to rub her face in it because it looks so soft. She just wants to stroke her face with the fur.
Oh.
Is how she put it. So she's not afraid at all of these things. So then she said, and keep in mind, she's just has never been exposed to anything like this. Then she tells me about the upper body. And she said, well, they're really big and they look like they're really muscly, but their arms are really long and they come down to here. She was poking on my leg, like below your knee, about maybe 2-3 inches below my knee would be how she described their arms falling on me if I had arms like them. And I said, oh, so they just have really long arms, huh? And she said, yeah. She said, but their hands are really weird. And I said, oh, well, they have hands? And she said, well, they're kind of like paw hands. They're really, really long. She pointed to the palm of my hand and she said that it's really long. And she put her hand at my middle knuckle and at the base of my hand and said, that's how big the palm of their hand is. It's really long and it's kind of skinny in relative size to how big the hand is. I think she meant like it's an elongated hand. And then she said she didn't call them fingernails. She called them claws, are the size of my fingers. She's little, so she has maybe 2.5-inch fingers. And I said, how wide are they? And she said they're as wide as her finger, which I don't know, maybe like 1/2 inch wide. So they're pretty substantial claws. And she said that she didn't notice that they had pads on the fingers, but she said that the fingers looked weird, that they were just really, really long. And she said when they stand, she pointed to this tree that's maybe 10 yards, maybe less, from her window. And she said when they stand there, that they're not completely hunched over like a dog, but they can't stand upright like us. And she said that they stand by this tree and watch her in her room. And if you can imagine someone that's getting ready to fight, how you have your palms facing up. It's kind of, if your palms are facing down and something comes at you, that split second that you'd have to turn your arm to react. I don't know if this is naturally how these things stand, but she was flexing her hands, her fingers, in and out really fast. She said that's how they stand, which made it even more of a terrifying situation for me, because I'm thinking, I played sports, I was an athlete, and I'm thinking, when you've got that kind of a stance, that's an athletic stance, and that's a go stance. That's the stance that you have when you're ready to pounce or when you want to go and do something fast or you need to react fast. That kind of twitchiness, that's how you get before games or before you're going to do something physical. That's how you get, or if you're in a situation where you feel threatened, that's how you get. Like I said, I'm not sure if that's how these things just naturally stand because they're predators. But when she was saying that they look at her and do that, I thought, oh my God, what are they going to do? If she got outside, what is this, like the swipe and grab? What is their intent? And she also pointed to a branch that's near the top of this birch tree, and that branch is 8 feet tall. And I know that it's 8 feet tall because we have the Sasquatch there. And when they have stood by that branch, because they will watch the house too, we did measure that, and that's an 8-foot plus branch. So whatever it is, it's really big. So I Googled the types of dogmen and found the different types. I didn't want to scare her, but I wanted to know what these things were and what they looked like. And so she's looking at these types, and she sees the type 3, which shocked me because she said that this thing didn't have much of a muzzle. And she said, it looks like this, only not mean. It doesn't look scary, Mom. It looks nice and friendly. If you look at the type 3, there's nothing friendly about that. I don't know how anybody, especially a little person, could look at that and think that there's anything cuddly, friendly, anything about that. And I was shocked when she said that that's what it looked like, because that type 3 has ears on the top of its head. And I even questioned her and said, are you sure? And usually when you question kids and you say, are you sure? And you put any grain of doubt that you're doubting what they say, they will change their story. No, she said, that's what it looks like. Only if you could make it look nice and not have a muzzle that's so long, that's what it looks like. And they're really nice, Mom. And, you know, it was the same thing with the hand posturing, that with the palms facing up. And she said that's how they walk when they're on 2 legs, that the palms face up. I questioned that because that seems so contrary to how we as humans walk, or how I've never seen anything in nature that normally walks on 4 legs, walk on 2. But in my head, I was thinking that can't be right. That can't be how they walk. And maybe it was because that makes it, to me, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, if you're walking with your palms forward, that gives you a lot more power, because you can easily pick something up, swipe at something. It just is a tactical advantage to walk that way once I started thinking about it. And then she also said, and this was all with very little prompting from me, I was very careful not to plant any ideas with her. And she started talking about the females. The way that she was talking about this, it was like seeing her friends at school. You know, it was so nonchalant, and she wasn't excited about it. So I could tell that this was something that she sees regularly enough to where she is not alarmed by it. She sees nothing wrong with it. She thinks that this is just normal. Because if kids see something out of the ordinary, or certainly something like this, they're going to be very excited, scared. If they're not scared, they're going to be so excited about it. And this was just like, yeah, you know, and the girls, they're skinnier than the boys. It's like you with my uncle, you know, and I'm not small. I'm 5'10", and I work out quite a bit. So I'm not a slight person. I have a pretty muscular build to me. And she said, it's like you with Aaron, like comparing you with him. And I thought, okay, so you've seen the females. And I said, well, is there any difference? I didn't want to get into the discussion about what they're going to tell you might look like. I was really curious about what that might look like. If it's like a dog where they just have the mammary glands going down the sides, or if they had breasts. I got kind of curious, but I didn't want to go there with my daughter. So I just stuck with that they're smaller than the men. But she definitely said that it looked like a type 3. And then yesterday, she just has been talking about this quite a bit lately. And yesterday she said, well, the only thing scary about them, and this was unprompted, this was right before bed, unprompted, the only thing scary about them is that they do look like a werewolf. And I just didn't even, Vic, I have been trying so hard not to be reactive to this and not to scare her. And I just said, maybe they look that way. Maybe they look scary like a werewolf, and they just can't help the way they look. I mean, I don't even know how to react to this anymore because, like I said, I don't want her to be afraid. But at the same time, I'm on high alert at my house now with this.
Robin, you've got your work cut out for you. I can't even imagine what you're going through with all this.
Will you help? And speaking with another person who had an encounter the other day really helped wrap my mind around this, because I think that our minds are, what we want to do is we want to rationalize this. And I certainly have tried to rationalize this. I've tried to make them into this benign thing, because why wouldn't my daughter have been hurt? Why is my dog still alive? Why haven't we had anything really scary happen lately? But then I think there's not a wild animal that would be able to communicate with the child to come outside. And there's not an intelligent being on the planet that's capable of communicating that would ever in a million years think that it is a good idea to try to coax a child outside in the middle of the night, knowing that there is a parent inside and that we have weapons inside. There's nothing that says I have good intent about that. There's just nothing. There's no way that I can frame that to where it would be a good situation.
Yeah, the idea of that doesn't exactly give you the warm and fuzzies, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, not at all. Not at all, especially hearing her say how they kind of creep around the house and check things out. That just is a level of, it's like a soul invasion. It's such an unsettling feeling. I can't even describe it. And I hope that nobody ever has to feel this way, because it is like being under assault at your house. It's not as bad as it was initially. I do think that the Sasquatch keep them at bay, as nutty as this sounds, and believe me, I wouldn't have believed myself 5 years ago if I'd been hearing myself talk about this. I would have thought that I'd had a breakdown and was living in fantasy land. But I do think that the Sasquatch keep them at bay. I don't know what their relationship is, but we haven't had the overt hostility and aggression that we initially had, knock on wood, since Lily was really little. We just have this tapping and this insistence that she comes outside, and I've had that feeling, that oppressive feeling again a couple of times over the past, I'd say 3 weeks. So I kind of know when they're around now. Now, after talking with you and knowing the difference, and when you said that the behaviors that I was describing when this initially started, and you said, that just doesn't sound like the Sasquatch, because you guys have such a good relationship. Why would they blow it? And why on earth would they act that way? And I thought, yeah, they don't act that way. So it's a real coming to Jesus when you figure out that we have these things active at our house, and they probably have never not been active at that house.
You're probably right. They're probably there and you just didn't know it.
Yeah.
Since your daughter started telling you about these experiences, have you noticed any negative effects that they've had on her?
No. Like I said, she has them framed in her mind as being friends. She's never called them anything other than dog friends. She has never expressed any fear of them. Even when she was telling me the only scary thing is sometimes they look like a werewolf, she kind of shrugged it off, like that somehow that's not really how they are. That, like in my mind, I'm thinking that must have been when they tried to act like fake nice. Because I don't know. I just can't imagine these things looking pleasant and cuddly and getting the feeling that you need to rub your face on their tail, but she said that she just wants to rub their fur. And I mean, it's a very frightening and horrific feeling that your child doesn't have any sense of fear regarding these things. But she hasn't had anything negative, not one thing, which is good, but I guess in a way it might be kind of bad because there's nothing there that is preventing it. I mean, if she wanted to open the doors, she's old enough now where she could open the doors and go outside, and I couldn't do anything.
Ew, that's got to be such a scary thought.
It is. She sleeps with me now.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all.
Yep.
A friend of yours who's a psychologist warned you against letting your daughter talk with another doctor about seeing Sasquatch and dogmen on your property. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, I took my daughter to see a psychologist just because she had some other things going on, and I wanted to make sure that she was okay with this because she's school age now. And we always tell her, please don't talk about the Sasquatch with anyone because we want to protect them and not everybody's going to understand. And she was seeing a psychologist, and the psychologist told me, she said, you know, you just cannot have her talk to any other physician about this period because they'll think that she's psychotic and that she is seeing things and that it is a little more than an overactive imagination. You do not want to talk about this with other professionals. And this particular woman had been on our property and had had an encounter with a Sasquatch. So she knows about them, but she was just framing this in terms of, yeah, you don't want to go and talk to anybody about this because they will think that if you talk about it, that you're crazy. And if your daughter talks about it, she's got something psychologically wrong with her.
Yeah, I can only imagine how trapped you must feel with all this. Can't turn to the professionals about this. Where do you go? Thank goodness at least you believe her and you're there to support her, so that's about all you can do.
Yeah, and you know what? I just want to stress that when this first started happening, the reason why I'm calm and able to remain pretty level emotionally with this is because the worst part of this happened 5 years ago. And at the time that happened, that we had all of this awful, awful stuff going on, and I had that oppressive feeling, I almost had a mental breakdown. I can't even explain what goes through your mind when you have all this stuff going on. And I thought that it was Sasquatch at the time. That's all I thought. I did not even remotely think about these things. And if I had, I probably would have had a breakdown because it is such a frightening feeling to have no control over what goes on your property. And you realize pretty fast that it's not your property. It really is their land and you're being allowed to exist on it. I don't look at our property as our property. I look at it as I'm kind of a guest and a steward of the land on this property, which has been a complete shift in my thinking. But in order to have an amicable relationship with the Sasquatch that I have, I had to let go of my thoughts that this is my property, what are you doing on it? And you don't have any control because at any moment, the Sasquatch that we have on our property are so large that they could very easily destroy the entire house, very easily. And now with these things, I don't know why they're even asking my daughter to open the door because there's nothing stopping them. If they wanted to get in and have access, they could have access to anything at any time, and we would just be gone.
I'm glad you realized that. Yeah, it is their area, it is their property. They just happen to allow you to live there.
Yep. And I tell you, Vic, as hard as it is as property owners, I would advise anybody that has this activity going on to change their mindset. And as hard as it is, to look at it as you're a guest there and to be very respectful of these creatures. Because whether you like it or not, they choose where they're going to be. And if they want to be on your property, there isn't a thing you can do about it. And the best course of action is you have to be assertive, but there's a balance. I found that you have to be assertive. You have to not show weakness, but you can't be aggressive either. You just have to be very respectful of them and of the land. You have to be respectful of the land is what I have figured out too.
Yeah, you're not going to intimidate these things. You're not going to outmuscle them. So, yeah, that sounds like that would be the best course of action. We talked about your daughter's experiences, but let's move on and talk about your own experiences with dog men. Starting with the encounter you had when you were 10. Please tell us all about that.
Well, to start with, our property has been in the family since the 40s. There was an old mining shack cabin on the property, and when that was there, the forest was right up against the cabin. It was put on a foundation. It was moved in from another location, and it was put on a foundation, so it sat up on top of this foundation. So it was a lot higher than a normal cabin or house would be. You had to take steps up to get up to the door. And there was a bathroom window. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom cabin, very small. And then there was a guest house off in the back. It was maybe 10 feet away and not well lit at all. And very thin walls. And this bathroom had a window that was 6 feet off the ground. And the reason why I know it's 6 feet off the ground is because my dad, when he would stand outside the window, you could barely see the top of his head, and he's 6'1". The window was a foot wide by about 1.5 feet in length. My brother and I were from the city, so we naturally got an eerie feeling in the woods just because it's a different environment. You're not used to it. The feelings that we got at this cabin, or at least that I got at this cabin at times, went beyond that. It was just this really scary, sick to my stomach feeling that I would get at the cabin sometimes. Well, my parents would play cards with my grandparents in the kitchen, which was maybe 10, 15 feet away from this bathroom. And I went to use the bathroom, and I got this feeling like something was looking at me. And it wasn't one of those feelings where it didn't have any curtains on it. But this was very different than one of those feelings like if you were in a bathroom without a curtain and you just thought, oh, something's looking at me, just because there isn't a curtain there. This was a something staring at me, don't look kind of feeling. And I looked up, and what I saw was this huge eye. The head couldn't even fit in the window. The head was turned, so I guess its right eye was looking down at me, and it was looking down. Whatever it was huge, and I could not wrap my head around it. When I was little, there wasn't the internet. There wasn't anything like this, so I had no idea what I was seeing. This eye was looking down at me, and it was big. It was a huge eye, and it was like it was backlit with a flashlight, only there wasn't any kind of light emanating from it. It was like a light bright when you put the lights in, and you can see the light, but there's nothing coming out of it to project out. And it was looking down at me, and it had a round pupil, and I remember seeing negative, it's like it was negative space. It was really black. And I saw this outline of fur from what was behind it, like the light coming from the sky behind it. And I couldn't figure out what it was because I couldn't see the whole head. It was just like this eye and this, I just didn't know what it was. But I saw all this fur. There's just this fur. And I looked up and I thought, like I said, I mean, you're just in shock. And I remember having this, like, whether this was these words, but it wasn't words projected. It wasn't like, don't you scream. But it was just this feeling like, don't scream. Do not scream. Do not move. That kind of a thing. It was this authoritative, scary, like, awful, like, don't move, don't scream. But it wasn't coming from me because I would have screamed. My head was thinking like, scream, run. Your normal reaction when you're little is to run screaming out of that bathroom. My parents weren't that far away. Well, then I'm still looking at this thing, and this took place really fast, but it just seems like it's frozen in time, like it took forever for this to do this, but it pulled its head back. And that's when I knew that this was some kind of thing that exists when you're a kid, it exists in your nightmare. And even then it was worse. It was worse than anything that I could ever possibly imagine in my 10-year-old brain. It had to back its head out so that it could turn its head because its muzzle was so big, its head was so big. And as it pulled back and turned its head, I could only see maybe a third of its head in that 1 foot expanse of that window. Its head wouldn't fit in there, and it had to turn and get its other eye, so that it could look down. It was still making eye contact with me, and then I don't remember much else about what happened, but I just remember not being able to understand what I saw and not telling anybody about it, not telling my family that was in the kitchen. I had suppressed that so far down that it wasn't until recently that I actually even remembered that. And it was because I started having these dreams of seeing this creature in my dreams and seeing that head in my dreams. And that's when it all started coming together, what my daughter was saying. I started having memory of that happening and having that same feeling that I had, that sickening, it's like it's just this oppression, this oppressive feeling of doom, like and it's like even beyond you're gonna die. It's like this feeling of you might die, but that would be a good thing compared to what you're going to experience right now. That kind of a feeling. It's awful. But I remembered having that feeling when this thing was looking at me and looking at its eye, and it was a yellowy, ambery eye with intelligence behind it. It did not look like when, you can look at your dog or at your cat or even at your horses, if you have horses, and you feel their emotion. You feel the bond between them. Even wild animals, you can look at them and you can see that they have intelligence. You might not feel that bond that you do with your animals, but even if you look at a predator, you don't get that malice. This was malice. This was like, I have never had that kind of a feeling from anybody. And, it's beyond what a normal, if it's an animal, this is not an animal. This is something else. This was something that had intelligence behind it. It had malice. There was some reason, I think, why it targets people, and it could have easily never been detected there. Why it would look in the bathroom at a little girl and glare and let me see its whole face and see how big it was and how massive it was, and then just walk away. It's crazy. And I don't know, Vic, if they can suppress your memory. I don't put anything. I think these things can do a lot more than we can understand. And I don't know if they're capable of suppressing your memory or if it's something that our brain does to protect ourselves from these reality altering experiences. But I pushed that so far down that I just had recently remembered it. But I know that that is a memory. It's not something that my mind started racing and suddenly my mind made this up. My mind doesn't work that way. If my mind's making something up, it's making up that I have a Porsche. It's not making up that I'm seeing this thing. I would not want anybody to ever see this thing. I wouldn't want anybody to ever experience the feelings that come up. That happened when I was 10. I have not gotten overly emotional about talking about it, and I feel just like I could sob like a baby right now, and I feel sick to my stomach just remembering that. It is an awful feeling. And then I started having these nightmares of seeing its head, and I didn't see the body, but I just saw its head. And it's like it's trying to convey this dread. It's not like a head, just like how if you were to dream that you saw a head. It's not like that. It's like you have this thing coming into your head and taking over your mind. It's like it's just in there, and I just felt scared all over again. But then I felt like this is where it gets really, like Robin's lost her mind. I felt this, and I don't know how to describe it. It's like this energy from within. And it was like this energy for me projecting out against that thing. And then it got better. Like I could see that it was kind of pushing it away. And I don't know if that was, I don't know if, as crazy as it sounds, if it was maybe trying to figure out how to protect yourself from this, or if you can that way. I don't know. But in my dream, it was like if you can imagine meditating, and when you get to the point where you feel like you can move chi or move energy around and then project it out, that's what this felt like an energy projection that comes from you that kind of pushed this thing out, as crazy as it sounds. But that was what I was dreaming. But that was my encounter, and I haven't had a full face encounter like that since that happened.
Well, thank goodness. People have different ways of dealing with emotional trauma like that. Maybe that's what was going on with you. You just had a hard time dealing with those memories, so you suppressed them.
Yeah, I would believe that. It was very traumatizing, even now as an adult, and having lived through having Sasquatch and having lived through everything I've lived through and understanding a little bit more about the wonderful, mysterious world we live in. I obviously get really emotional. Reliving that makes me very emotional. And when you're little and you know that you can't tell your parents or your grandparents because they're not going to believe you, and you don't believe yourself, I think that is one of the only ways that you can deal with it, is just to suppress it. I think you're right.
Yeah, in some circumstances, suppressing the memories, that's the best you can do. So it makes sense that that's how it played out.
Yeah.
Listening to you describe that dog, man, it sounds to me like its eyes weren't positioned in the traditional locations. Were they, or am I just reading you wrong?
I've been thinking about that a lot because I've been trying to really remember, and it was so big, Vic, that it's hard to figure out if it had eyes on the side of its head, kind of like a horse, or if its head was just so big that it couldn't see in that window because the window was so much smaller than its head. I just don't know. But when I was looking at the different types, it definitely looked like the kind that looks like a timber wolf, the kind that looks like a big wolf. That's what I saw. That's what it looked like, only it wasn't, and the eyes were bigger. I just don't know about the eyes, but it does seem like if it had to move its head to get one eye to look down and then to get the other eye to look down, that they would be positioned more on the sides of the head instead of how a dog would have its eyes positioned. Because even if you can't really see in a space, our eyes are positioned in the front of our heads, and we don't have to look in that way to see something. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And if that dog man did have eyes on either side of its head, it's not like that would be unprecedented. Kirk Stokes, who was the guest on episodes 18 and 19, that's the type of dog man that he saw when he was fishing late one night. Also, there was a couple inside the city limits of Dallas who reported seeing a dog man with eyes like that. So, if that's how it was, you wouldn't have been the first person to report a dog man that looked that way.
Yeah, that even makes it worse.
Yeah, I guess it does.
Yeah.
Did you ever notice whiskers on its muzzle when it was standing there looking in that window at you?
I don't remember. I just remember seeing a muzzle and seeing all this fur. You know how when dogs are wet, you can see the musculature underneath their head or their body? Even with all this fur that this dog man had, I could still tell, if it makes sense, where its head was and where its fur began. And its head was just, even without the fur, it still would have dwarfed that window. They're just so big.
Yeah, they do have some big heads. Not all dogmen do, but some kinds do. If you had to guess, how big do you think that dogman was?
It was looking down. It was definitely looking down. It had to have been at least 7 feet tall, because that window, my dad's 6'1". His head barely touched the top of that window. You couldn't see his eyes. The window's 1.5 feet, and this thing's looking down. So it had to have been over 7 feet tall, looking in that window.
Did you ever go out the next day to look for evidence?
Oh God, no. I don't even remember. I honestly, I can't tell you. I think it's like when people have PTSD and they can't remember the events that happened after something traumatizing happened to them. I couldn't tell you. I don't remember what I did, but I know that I most likely did not go look for anything.
Oh, I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. One time you found something strange by your bedroom window. What did you find?
Well, this was when we just had started having all this activity. And I mean, when I say activity, I mean this was nonstop. There were bangs constantly on the house. It sounded like it was coming from the subfloor. We have a crawl space where underneath the house there's the heater and the water heater and all that. It sounded like it was coming from the roof. Sounds all over. Just constant activity. And I woke up one morning after hardly sleeping and having all this, because this activity was going on and I hardly slept. I was so scared. Just thinking it Sasquatch, I was just scared. And I woke up and here is a pile of guts right by my window, right underneath my bedroom window. And nothing else, no organs, just guts, just intestines, and I don't know if the stomach was attached. I didn't really look that close, but it was just this pile of fresh guts right there. And at the time I thought, well, I knew I had two things going through my mind. I thought, number one, the Sasquatch are going to kill me. And this is just like the warning. When you're scared, you think the weirdest things. I thought, I'm a goner. This is how I'm going to go. This is like showing me you're dead. We're going to get you. Or it was something threatening. If they weren't going to kill me, it was something threatening, like, we can get you any time. That's what I thought. Or I thought, well, it's some kind of a gift, or maybe they left it to be nice. I didn't know. But at any rate, before, the thought in my mind was that it was threatening and that I was a goner, that this was some kind of a threat. But they left a pile of guts by my window. And then the thought occurred, is this the trade? What are they going to trade? What do they want? You know, it felt to me like it was some kind of I don't know. It was so gross and it was so just odd and icky. I didn't know what to think of it, but I certainly didn't think it was anything positive. But again, I thought it was Sasquatch because I didn't think these things really existed.
Yeah, when you look at a pile of guts sitting outside your window, it is hard to know what to make of that, but maybe it was in fact some sort of an offering, whether it was from the Sasquatch or from the dogman, we don't know, but maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, I don't know, Vic, but I can tell you that the Sasquatch, when they leave things, it's usually toys. Or I like rocks, so they'll leave me rocks. They find things that they know that you like. Like for me, ironically, I have a bracelet that I keep in, it was a gift and I keep it in a little, I lost the bag, but I was keeping it in a little blue Tiffany bag. It's robin's egg blue. And they will give me, when I'm out walking or running, I'll find robin's eggs in July on a log in the middle of the woods when I'm running. Or over a place. I usually go on trails that aren't loops, that usually run in and run out on the same trail. And where I was before, there'll be something there. It's usually things that I like, not something that I would think is scary. And I don't think they eat that kind of thing. I've never had that happen since. So it doesn't make sense to me that it would be them. It could have been. I'm not ruling that out. But to me, it doesn't make sense with the things that they know that we like. Even back then, they were leaving, I don't know where they got them, probably from a neighbor or someone in town, but they would leave those plastic flowers out sometimes. So they do things like that, but not anything that gory.
Well, I know dogmen seem to love entrails and gut piles like that. Sasquatch, they've been known to take gut piles from hunters too. I don't know how much of a delicacy it might be to them, but I know on some occasions people have reported them taking gut piles from areas where they've shot a deer, for example. But what's behind that, I really don't know.
I don't either. I'm just glad that I'm alive to tell the tale, Vic.
Me too. I'm glad you are too. Yesterday you saw something strange back in some pine trees on your property. Please tell us about what happened.
I did. I was out, and like I said, I'm just, I guess, coming to terms with this, and I guess trying to wrap my head around all this, because I've been in denial for so long of things that were so obvious. And I was outside. We have a very large field, and then we have woods. And it's very thick woods. And I was maybe 8 or 10 yards away from the tree line, and I saw this green, it was like a backlit eye in the tree line about 6, 7 feet back. It was maybe a foot off the ground, and it was very large. It was almond shaped, but you know how the almond has the tip where it's kind of pointy? It didn't have that extreme of a point. And the reason why I know that kind of detail is because it was a very large thing. And to me, it looked like an eye, because there's nothing out in the woods right now. It's brown. There's nothing out there that would be able to naturally make that color. There's nothing in nature. There's leaves. We don't have leaves that color. and it was a very bright green, and it was backlit. So it was very obvious that something was there. I didn't get that creepy feeling, but it definitely was not a Sasquatch. The Sasquatch, they have brown eyes. During the day, they're brown. I've never seen green eyes from them, ever. I have seen them where their eyes are like an amber, but it's a really pretty amber, and it's warm, and it is backlit like this appeared to be, but this was green, and this was backlit, and it was in a spot where the Sasquatch will usually kind of halfway down in when we have company over and they want to see what's going on. They'll be back there, and they're usually on their bellies, is kind of what we figured out, so that they can see but not be seen, because you can just blend in and you'd never know anybody's there. But this was standing out. So whatever it was, it's something that I haven't seen before. I have seen mountain lions. I've seen lots of predators out here, and this wasn't anything I have ever seen. I don't know what it was, but I stared at it long enough to see if it would blink, because it's almost like you're in disbelief, thinking this can't be what I'm seeing. I can't explain it, but I don't know what it is. I don't know what it was, but I went inside, went out, and it was gone. And yesterday I went out with my dog and my daughter, and my dog went right to that area and was really keen on whatever scent was left there. He was at that exact spot, just really going to town sniffing. And with the Sasquatch, they've laid there before, and he does not pay attention to that area at all. So it definitely must have been a new scent to him, because he triggered on that area and really stuck to that area and really sniffed it out. And usually when we're outside, he's like glue dog. You know, Great Danes, they're right on you. They're just like Velcro, and he's very protective of me and my daughter. And when we're outside, he'll run and play, but if we're out, he's right by us, paying very close attention to us, and he just couldn't care less. He was so keyed into whatever the scent was by whatever was laying there, and I didn't have the guts to go back and see. I am not going back there.
Yeah, I'd say that was a smart move. Sure does make you wonder what that was, though.
It really does. It's something I haven't seen before, and I pay very close attention to my surroundings. I did before you and I had spoken, and before I had figured out about what's going on our property, just because of mountain lions and other things. You pay very close attention when you live remotely. But like I said, this was nothing that I'd ever experienced, and it's not there now, so it's not replicating. And like I said, there's nothing green that would produce that kind of internal illumination that I can think of. I don't know what it was.
Well, if it was back in thick trees like that, even during the daytime, maybe it was dark enough where you were seeing eyes shine. It's just hard to know.
Yeah, it really is. But whatever it was quite large. It was about the size of a golf ball, maybe, but more of an almond shape, not round.
Yeah, if that was an eye, that's a pretty big one.
Yeah.
You think a dog man might have broken into your home one time. Why do you think that?
Well, I think that at the time when we were talking, like I said, I thought all this was Sasquatch, and that they were just these rude, awful creatures that invaded my home, and I thought they were doing all this. Well, like I described before, our locks are security locks. So when you engage these locks, there's 4 pegs that come out horizontally and 2 that come out vertically. The pegs are about the size of a man's pinky in width, and they are 1.5 to 2 inches long. So they really lock in to the door frame, and the door frame is cedar. We have cedar logs framing the door, and it's a French door in the back of our house. And the front of our house has almost like a French door, but they're all glass. The entire back of our house is glass, so that we can enjoy the river and things. my aunt knew about the Sasquatch on our property, and she and I had gone to the nearest town just to go do shopping, which was 60 miles away. We came back, and the back door was open. The locks were all engaged, and there was a big crack running up the center of where the top of that cedar log is that runs horizontally over the top of the door. It's a very big log. There was a crack going up from that cedar log all the way to the roof, which caught my eye immediately alongside with the door being open. And we went over there to the door. These locks, I can't even explain to you. There's no way to close the door with those locks engaged because of the logs that frame the doorway. Something had engaged these locks and pushed with such force with the locks engaged that it dug into the cedar log that framed it. It split the cedar log coming down from the top down. There were 3 door latches at the top, the middle, and the bottom, where the tongue of the door, I don't know if that makes sense, where the tongue of the door comes, and then it closes. So in addition to the security locks, we have those door latches, too. And where those were, it was just split. The log was split, and there was all this damage. And then at the top, where the cedar log that is running vertically meets the one across the top that's horizontal, there was an inch gap suddenly in this door frame. And my first thought is, what happened? What on earth could have done this? Because I can unlatch those locks. I'm not a small person. I'm a very strong person. I can't push on that door and make those latches, even with the grooves that were left from that damage. I can't push it and make it go in, even into these grooves. It's just impossible for me. You can't do it. So we got the door shut, looked at that, and then we started looking around the house, and there were these deep, deep gouges. At the time, my daughter was 2, so this was when all this first started going on. So I had baby latches on every single cupboard. Everything had baby latches. Well, where I keep the garbage, there are these huge gashes. That's the best way to describe it, is gashes and gouges in the pine. We have pine cabinets. In the pine cabinets, there are just these gouges, like something trying to open those doors and couldn't figure out how to disengage the baby latch. Just these huge, thick gouges. And I could fit my pinky into one of these gouges. And the same thing where I keep the dog treats, ironically, there were all these gouges over there. You know, at the time, we're thinking that it's Sasquatch, that they're doing this and that they're naughty. They must have accidentally done that to the door. And, you know, even though they don't have claws, they have finger pads. They must have somehow used their finger pads to gouge out these huge gouges in pine wood cabinetry. So, you know, you wrap your mind around whatever makes sense at the time, but we had all that damage inside the house. And then at the same time, was talking about these dog friends and how they would come and take little bits of garbage, but they wouldn't take enough so that you would notice. And I'm thinking that she's misidentifying Sasquatch and saying that Sasquatch comes in the house and gets in the garbage and takes little bits. And I think in retrospect, she was talking about these dog friends, because I think as little as she was, she knew the difference between these two beings. And then we had all this damage to the garage door, where if you can imagine taking the head, you know how nails have different head gauges, and you have some that are maybe the size of your thumbnail? If you can imagine taking one of those, or maybe the size of like a middle finger one, maybe not the size as big as a thumbnail, but if you can imagine taking those, something that has a point that's that diameter and width, and clawing, but not clawing like scrape clawing, like if a cat claws at something and the nails engage and they stick to it and it leaves like that prick. If you can imagine that happening to a steel garage door, like the kind that you open with your hand to go into the garage, that's what happened to our garage door. My garage door has claw nail point damage right by the door. Like if someone was trying to get in between the door frame and the door to kind of pry it open, that's what it looks like. We have that damage. And then the night before the gut pile was left, my daughter and I were sleeping in my bedroom. At this time, I had her sleeping with me because I was scared and because I didn't want her alone in her bedroom. We heard, it started off with all this pounding on the side of the house and banging. I tried really hard not to be scared because whatever it was, my daughter's not scared. And the most important thing you want to do as a parent is to keep calm and to keep your kids calm and not make them scared because you're scared. So I'm trying to remain calm. And there's all this banging going on. And then we hear this god-awful crunch, like crunching. And it sounds like my roof is being crumpled like aluminum foil. And this is a metal roof with bolts, thick bolts the size of your thumb that are bolting this. It's to keep snow from sliding down on you. It's a 5-inch lip, I guess, that's bolted on the top of our roof. Our roof, to get to the roof line, it's 20 feet. The guest house roof is 16 feet at the peak of it. Well, as I'm hearing all this crumpling of metal from the back of the house, right by my head, it is a corner of the roof, and that is between 12 and 14 feet high. And I'm hearing it crumpling up there. So I'm not only hearing all this god-awful roof crumpling from the back of the house, but also from the front of the house. And then I hear the loudest, I don't even know how much something would have to weigh to make the sound on the back deck, but I thought the deck was going to collapse. It was this huge, two things, boom, boom, right after the other. It wasn't like one foot hit then the other. It was two distinct things landing on both feet on my deck. And I can't even describe the feeling of absolute horror and fear. It was just like I felt like I was being assaulted. I felt like we were under assault. I didn't know how to protect my daughter. I couldn't call the police. How the heck do you explain to the police that you have what I thought was Sasquatch jumping on your deck? And I didn't know how to explain it, and that they did damage to your roof, that you think that there's something on your roof crumpling a metal roof that you can't hit with a hammer and make a dent. Maybe you could make a small dent, but that's the strength of this roof. It's a very sturdy, strong roof, thick metal, and it's being crumpled like how I would crumple aluminum foil. I could hear bolts popping out of the top of that roof. I didn't sleep that night, and that was the next morning when I found that gut pile. And that probably added to my feeling that I was going to die, and that was, to me, it felt like a threat. Like, yeah, look what we can do to your roof. We can do this to you. This could be you. That's what I felt. Maybe in retrospect, they felt bad for damaging my roof and left that as a peace offering. I don't know. But the next morning, I called my aunt, just petrified. She came out. We saw all the damage that had been done. And the next day we stayed at her house for a month. I went back to that house to let the dogs out, and I would stay there during the day. But during the day I was terrified. I felt this awful oppression. I felt like impending doom. You can't even describe this feeling. It feels like something is pressing down on your soul. It is beyond fight or flight. It's beyond fear. It's beyond depression. It's like you're in the bottom of a well full of darkness. That's how it felt when I was at that house. And then when I would leave, it would go away. So that's how I knew that this was not something mentally going on with me, that there was something at that house. And every time I went there, I felt stalked, and it was just an awful, awful feeling. And we stayed with my aunt, but even at her house, we heard pebbles being thrown at the house, and she's 10 miles away.
It sure sounds like you were under siege in that house.
That's what it felt like. And another reason for telling my story is because there's nobody you can call. There's nobody you can call. I was alone with my baby and alone in a remote part of the country. And like I said, I thought it was Sasquatch. Now, do I think that was them? Absolutely not. No, I don't. But even with them, and people more readily believe that now, that they exist, who can you call? How can anybody protect you from this? And I think you have to assert yourself, but like I said, in a respectful way. And you have to claim your own power, but in a respectful way. You can't be cowering around these things, because it wasn't until I got so fed up with this, just so entirely fed up with this, and got mad. And I had seen a person who I trust, who's a religious leader, and they had told me to just go and stand your ground. So that's what I did. As scared as I was, I went to every little inch of that property, and it's a big-sized property. It's acres, and I went all around our acreage, and I just said, look, if you are not good, you are not allowed here. You cannot be here. This is where I am. This is my space. This is my daughter's space. And if you are not good, if you have bad intentions, get out. You're not allowed here. Only I said it in a way that comes from a part of your body, that, and I think a part of your soul, that you can only access when you are that desperate, that mad, and that frightened of something. It's like this power that you hear about people having when a child's trapped under a car. That's the kind of internal power that I found, that I projected out on every part of my property. And it wasn't until then that this stuff eased up, and I felt respite from that oppression and from all that constant, and I mean, when I say constant, I mean constant knocking, constant just noises all the time. It was all the time. My aunt would come over and we would sit there, and it would just be constant. The knocks, the bangs, the noise on the roof, but we didn't think anything was on the roof. I mean, we didn't know that anything could get on a roof that was that big, but we heard noises on the roof, and we just assumed that the Sasquatch were just that big that they were banging on the roof. But now I think it was these things on the roof, but it was just constant. And it was like, it kind of sounds like someone banging. It wouldn't be that threatening. If you have something that huge banging on your house all the time, and then you couple that with this oppressive feeling that you don't have when you leave your home, it feels like you're under the worst kind of psychological warfare. That's the best way to describe it, is psychological warfare. It felt like it was tactical.
Yeah, psychological warfare does pretty much sum it up. Was there ever an option for you to sell that home and move away?
It would have been an option. It's a very valuable piece of property financially. It's a very expensive piece of property. I had brought it up that I think that this house needs to be sold. I'm glad we didn't. I think that there was a time where I probably would have sold it. That was probably the worst month there, or 2 months being there. Once I went around that property and just stood my ground and things let up, it became a completely different situation. And now there's just no way that I would ever sell it. Even with these things coming back and trying to coax my daughter outside, I will refuse to sell it. I'm not moving. If the situation got as bad as it was before, where I felt threatened, I might change my mind, but I think we've got a good handle on things now, and I wouldn't sell. It's too pretty. Despite it all, it's too pretty, Vic. Knowing that it's these things that are coming around, and I feel empowered now that I'm not in denial. I was in denial for the longest time, even back to suppressing my memory of what happened to me. But I feel like we do have a very, very good group of Sasquatch on our property, and I feel safe with them. I know the difference now with feelings when they're there and when these things are there, and I know to be cautious. And I also think that as awful as I think these things are, and as nefarious as I think these things are, I feel like they could grab my daughter or I at any moment. They could kill my dog at any moment. I'm not a fool in thinking that they're, like my daughter said, she wants to run her fingers through their fur. I'm not thinking that at all. I'm thinking that because she feels that way, that they want her. There's something, I just think that I just refuse to believe that that is a kind, warm, and fuzzy motive behind that. But I don't feel threatened like I did before. I feel like be out there, be cautious, but I don't feel imminent danger like I did initially.
Well, I'm so glad you at least feel better about the situation now. That's good news.
Yeah, I really do, and it's thanks to you and all of the time that you spent listening to me and speaking with me, and with another person who was on your show who took the time to really speak with me about this, and it has helped me enormously. It's like a weight off my shoulders to finally talk to someone about it and to unravel this for myself. It's like a gift to be able to unravel all this and not to have it like a suppressed memory, and to have all these pieces come together, because knowledge is power.
It definitely is. And hearing things like that from an eyewitness, it makes all the work that's required to keep all this afloat more than worth it. So I can't tell you how happy that makes me to hear that.
Yeah, you do all of us a great service, because I don't know who you can talk to about this. I barely told my brother about this, and he's open. He's an open person, and we're very close, and I told him about it, and it wasn't until I told him that I spoke with your former guest and what he had to say that he actually came to accept that this is not you need to believe your daughter, that these things are nice. Maybe they're not a threat. And I said, no, it wasn't until I had someone that had this experience too, kind of fortifying my beliefs, and to help him understand that nothing good, nothing positive, there's not one good being on the earth or beyond that would want a child to come outside at night without their parents' knowledge. That's nefarious intent.
Yeah, that does have bad news written all over it. I can't see how there could be a happy ending to that sort of thing.
I don't either, especially after she described how they stared. All I could think of was slash and grab. The whole thing is just really sickening.
Your mom's friend had some unnerving things happen to her at a remote A-frame cabin one time. Please tell us what happened to her.
I will. My mom has a really, really cool lifetime friend who has experienced all kinds of things. She is a really amazing person. And we told her that we had Sasquatch on the property and showed her the footprints that we find and all this. And she said, "Oh, I believe you." And I said, "I'm so glad." I said, "I knew you would, but I'm just so glad to hear you affirm that you believe me." And she said, "Oh, I believe you because I had something happen to me at your grandparents' friend's A-frame." Like I said, this property's been in our family since the 40s. And this woman is now in her 70s. So she, about 5 miles further into the mountains, so this is even more remote, this couple had an A-frame. And if you don't know what an A-frame is, it's a type of cabin that looks almost like a chalet, like you would imagine a Swiss chalet to look like, where it is a triangle. The roof is a triangle, and it goes all the way to the bottom. So there aren't any walls. The walls are the roof on the sides. And then it has a front face and a back face. So you can imagine the angle of that roof. It's a very steep slope. So this friend of my mom's was telling me that when she graduated from high school, she was a senior, and she and a bunch of her girlfriends asked permission to go and stay at this cabin. And the owners of the cabin, my grandparents' friends, said, "Go ahead, go stay there, have fun." So all these girls, these high school girls, were going to stay at this cabin for a week. And she said when they were there, they heard something on the roof so big, and it was very loud on that roof. And I'm trying in my mind, trying to imagine what could be big and what could even have the dexterity and the balance to stand on an A-frame roof and to be walking around on an A-frame roof. It just was boggling my mind. And then the door handles that they had were the knobs, the turn knobs. Well, then she said that while something was on that roof, something else was trying to turn that knob on the front and the back door. The knobs were being turned, and that she thought that whatever it was could break the knobs. So it must have been turning it with some force. So she said that once all that noise stopped, they cut their vacation short. They just left. And she said they never really told anybody about that incident happening. But when I told her, and she saw the tracks of the Sasquatch and everything around our property, she said, "Oh, I bet that's what it was." And at the time, I didn't think that these dog men were around. I didn't really believe they existed. So I said, yeah, maybe it was just these young Sasquatch, because they play jokes on us all the time. They're never on the roof or anything like that. That didn't occur to me because, like I said, you try to frame it with what you know. But that happened to her, and after speaking with you, I don't think that that was a Sasquatch. They don't seem to try to assault people in that way. When you've got something on the roof, in the front and in the back, that's assault. That is assaulting a place because you can't get out. And you know you can't get out when it's the front, the back, and the roof. That's just not what they do. They'll bang and let you know that they're there, but they don't make you feel like you're under siege.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if those weren't Sasquatch either. Wouldn't be surprised in the least if they were dogmen, because, as we know now, dogmen do seem to like spending time up on roofs for whatever reason.
Yeah. I had no idea, and now you better believe that at night, every little creak I am alerted to.
I don't blame you. You know of an area nearby that has bear-proof trash cans that were frequently being opened. What's the story behind that?
Well, our community is remote, and we have a lot of wildlife, and one of the more regular residents here are bears, and we have had grizzly bears come close to town. We also have a large population of black bears here. And if you've been around bears, you know that they have a lot of dexterity, and they can open trash cans. And one of the initiatives here was to have bear-proof garbage cans for people. So a couple of years ago, they had bear-proof garbage cans that suddenly stopped working, and they thought the bears had figured it out. And there was just rubbish all over. They were getting into garbage cans and stuff. And now they just last year changed the garbage cans to something that, I mean, even I admit I'm not the most mechanical person. It takes me forever to figure out these garbage cans and how to get them open. And I've been using them for months now, and I still have a hard time. So they have these really very difficult to open garbage cans, but the ones before, they were very difficult to open as well. And there was nothing wrong with them other than they thought that the bears were able to open them and had figured it out, which I don't discount. But after all of the activity that we've had, and with my daughter telling me how they get into garbage and that they eat garbage, I'm 10 miles from town, which is nothing for them. So it makes me wonder if maybe they were coming into town and getting into stuff. You never know.
Yeah, that just might be what was going on. It's hard to say.
Yeah. But it was very interesting because they just had gotten those garbage cans, and, you know, you'd think that it would be an expense to switch all the garbage cans out again. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with that, but I'm kind of suspicious now.
Dogmen do have the intelligence and the strength to get into bear-proof trash cans like that, so it's possible. That doesn't mean that's what did it, but it's definitely within the realm of possibility.
I think that they are smarter than most people. The things that they do, like assaulting someone from the front, the back, and the roof, what they did with my mom's friend and what they did at our house. And we also have been hearing the door handles jiggling at night lately, which is something the Sasquatch don't do and is very alarming. We even called the police because we thought somebody was breaking in to our home, and they came out, and now we've heard it a couple of times really late at night, like 2, 3 in the morning, and it's very forceful jiggling. So I think that they're trying to get in the house, or they're trying to let us know that they're trying to get in the house, which animals don't normally do. Their stealth. A normal animal wouldn't do that. I firmly believe that there is nothing that these things do that isn't tactical and that doesn't have intent and purpose behind it. I just don't know what that is.
Well, don't lose sight of the fact that if they wanted to get into the house, they'd come into the house. I think that's just a tactic to shake you up.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I think that's all that is. Before we get into your closing comments, I wanted to ask you about the fact that you mentioned earlier that your property used to be Crow land. Do you know if there are any Native American burial mounds around that area?
I know that they have found medicine wheels around this area. I know that there has been a lot of arrowheads and other artifacts found. I'm not sure about burial grounds, but I know that they have a lot of sacred sites around here. I don't think on our property, but I know that around here they've found a lot of medicine wheels and other things too. So nothing would surprise me, and I bet that there is something around here because the whole area was native land.
Yeah, if you had that much of a presence there at one time, I'd be surprised if there weren't a bunch of mounds around that area somewhere.
I can ask around. There are a lot of elderly people here that have been here and have ranched here their whole lives, and they're the second and third generation of ranchers. So I'm sure there's some history that I can kind of dig around and try to uncover. But it wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Before we have you get into your closing comments, I just wanted to share with the listeners, you've taken a bunch of photos to show the things you've been talking about around your property, the gouges, damages, and things like that. I'm going to post those photos in the YouTube version of tonight's show so that people can check them out.
I'm very glad, because it's not until people see this stuff that they can even begin to wrap their head around what people are talking about when you talk about how big these things are and the sheer power that they have and how stealthy they are to think that they get in your home. I mean, you talk about just the ultimate violation is these things being in your home and going in your things. You know, it's just, really creepy.
Oh, I'd say it is. And yeah, you did a great job of taking photos of all that damage to chronicle what happened. There are a bunch of good pics I highly recommend if you're listening to the podcast version of this show. Highly recommend you check out the YouTube version so you can take a look at them. But having said that, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share tonight?
Well, I just would like people to know that after listening to some of your shows, Vic, and people who come forward, I think that I can echo a lot of their sentiment that we come forward because we've experienced something that is very hard for us to believe. It's hard for us to wrap our heads around, but it happened. This phenomena is real. Clearly, I don't have all the answers. I don't have any answers. I don't know what their nature is. But if you have had anything happen, it helps to talk about it. It helps to get your story out because so many of the people that have reported their stories helped me find the courage to publicly talk about what happened to my family. And I don't even talk about this among my family, about the dogmen. So many people understand Sasquatch, and we certainly have had nothing but positive encounters with them. But these things, I haven't been hurt. My daughter hasn't been hurt. We haven't lost any dogs. We lost cats to this. They're dangerous. Parents, believe your children. If they start talking about things like this, most children do not make this up. I can't imagine any child making this up. If you think these things are warm and cuddly, or not even warm and cuddly, that's kind of condescending. But if you think that they're not harmful and that they will leave you alone, I would very much caution against that, because anything that wants children to go outside alone and is doing this night after night to your child, there's no good intent behind it. They're very cunning and they are manipulative. And I would not go looking for them. I would not seek this out, because I also think that once you find them or they find you, that for whatever reason, it makes, I don't know how it happens, but I think that they track you or can follow you, or there's the way that they can find you, as crazy as that sounds. So please don't go seeking this out. If you haven't seen one, you are a fortunate person.
Oh, I'd say so. Robin, I wish you nothing but the best. Thanks so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Vic, and thank you for all of your help, because you truly have helped bring some kind of closure to this. Even though it still is ongoing, you really have helped with healing and coming to terms with something that is just very difficult. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, Robin, thanks again so much for your time. I hope you have a great night.
Thank you. You too, Vic. Good night.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.